Welcome to Fairy Tale Dreams, where every story holds a new adventure. Settle in, and let's begin.
There once lived a woman who wanted to have a child, but she didn't know where to get one. And so she went to an old sorceress and said to her, "Oh, how I wish I had a little child. Can't you tell me where I can get one?" "That's a very easy job," said the sorceress. "Here's a barley grain for you. It's not like the grains that grow in the field, nor like those they throw to the chickens. Plant it in a pot, and you'll see what happens." "Thank you," said the woman, and gave the sorceress 12 shillings. Then she went home and planted the barleycorn in a pot. At that very moment, a large, wonderfully beautiful flower grew from the pot, resembling a tulip, except that its petals were folded like an unopened bud. "What a beautiful flower!" cried the woman, and kissed its fiery yellow petals. But at that moment, the flower burst open with a bang. Yes, it was a real tulip, but in the middle of its cup sat a tiny little girl, very delicate and sweet. In height she was no bigger than a human thumb, and so the woman named her Thumbelina. A beautiful varnished walnut shell became Thumbelina's cradle, blue-violet leaves were her bed, and a pink petal was her blanket. In this cradle she slept at night, and during the day she played on the table where the woman had left a plate of water. The plate was surrounded by a wreath of flowers, whose stems were in the water, on which floated a large tulip leaf. Thumbelina could sit on it and swim from one end of the plate to the other. Her oars were 2 white horsehairs. Everything was so beautiful. Thumbelina could also sing, and no one had ever heard such a gentle and pleasant voice. One night, as she lay in her cradle, a large frog crawled through the broken pane of the window, disgusting, wet. The frog jumped straight onto the table where Thumbelina was sleeping under a rose leaf. "Here's a bride for my son," said the frog, grabbed the walnut shell with the little girl, and jumped through the window into the garden. A large, wide stream flowed through the garden. Its bank was marshy and muddy, and there lived the frog with its son. Oh, how ugly and disgusting he was, just like his mother, quacks, quacks, breck-eck-eck-ex. That was all he said when he saw the little girl in the walnut shell. "Don't croak so loudly, you'll wake her up," said the old frog. "She might escape us. Look how light she is, like swan's down. Let's put her in the middle of the stream on a wide water lily leaf. She is so small and light that for her it will be a true island. From there she won't be able to escape, and in the meantime we will clean the guest room down under the swamp, where you will sit and live." In the stream grew many water lilies with wide green leaves, which seemed to float on the surface of the water. The old frog swam to the largest leaf, which was furthest from the bank, and placed the walnut shell with Thumbelina on it. Early in the morning, little Thumbelina woke up, and seeing where she was, cried bitterly. The green leaf was surrounded on all sides by water, and she could not get to dry land. The old frog was sitting down in the mud, decorating her house with reeds and yellow water lilies, because she wanted to arrange the young bride's room nicely. Then she swam away with her ugly son to the leaf where Thumbelina was sitting. She wanted to take the pretty bed and put it in the newlyweds' bedroom before Thumbelina went there herself. The old frog bowed low to her in the water and said, "Let me introduce you to my son. He will be your husband, and the two of you will live wonderfully in the mud." "Quack, quack, ribbit, ribbit, cake," the son could only say. Then they took the beautiful little bed and floated away with it, and Thumbelina remained alone on the green leaf, and bitter tears fell from her eyes. She did not want to live with the disgusting frog and be the wife of her ugly son. The little fish swimming under the water saw the frog and heard her words. They also wanted to see the little bride, and so they poked their little heads above the water And as soon as they saw her, they felt very sorry that such a sweet little girl would have to live with the old frog in the mud. No, this must not happen. And they gathered underwater around the green stem of the leaf and gnawed through it with their teeth. At that very moment, the leaf floated away with Thumbelina down the current, far, far away where the frog could not reach her. Thumbelina was swimming by wonderful cities. The little birds in the bushes were watching her and singing. What a sweet, tiny girl! And the leaf was floating further and finally, Thumbelina arrived in a foreign land. A beautiful white butterfly was circling above her. It landed on the leaf, because it liked the little girl very much. And Thumbelina rejoiced with all her heart. Now the frog could no longer reach her, and everything around was so beautiful. The sun was glowing like gold in the water. Thumbelina took off her belt, tied one end of it to the butterfly, and the other to the leaf, which then floated even faster on the water. A May beetle flew past. It saw the little girl, embraced her with its tiny legs, and carried her to a tree. The green leaf again continued its journey down the brook, and along with it, the butterfly. It was tied to the leaf and could not free itself. Oh, how frightened poor Thumbelina was when the beetle caught her and flew with her towards the tree. But her greatest sorrow was for the beautiful white butterfly, tied to the leaf. If it failed to free itself, it would die of hunger. But the May beetle wasn't thinking about that at all. He sat down with Thumbelina on the largest leaf of the tree, fed her honey, and told her that she was very sweet, although she didn't resemble a May beetle at all. Afterward, the other May beetles who lived on the same tree also came to visit them. They examined Thumbelina from head to toe, and the young lady beetles puffed themselves up with pride. "She only has 2 little legs. How pitiful she looks," they said. "She doesn't have tentacles," others said. "What a thin waist, just like a person's." "Ugh, how ugly she is," all the beetles cried out in one voice. And Thumbelina was so sweet. The May beetle who had brought her saw this too. But when everyone started saying she was ugly, he himself believed it and decided not to keep her with him anymore. He flew down with her from the tree and placed her on a daisy. Thumbelina was left alone again and cried bitterly for being so ugly that even the beetles didn't want her. In fact, she was the most wonderful creature one could imagine, slender, delicate, like the most beautiful pink petal. All summer, Thumbelina spent completely by herself in a big forest. She wove herself a little grass cradle and hung it under a large burdock leaf, so the rain couldn't fall on her. She ate honey and drank dew, which she collected every morning from the leaves. Thus passed the summer and autumn. But then winter arrived, a long and cold winter. All the songbirds flew away, the trees became bare, the flowers withered, and the large leaf under which Thumbelina lived turned yellow, dried up, and curled into a tube. The little girl shivered from the cold. Her little dress was torn to shreds, and she herself was so tiny, so delicate, that she was sure to freeze. It began to snow, and every snowflake was to Thumbelina what a whole shovel of snow is to us, because we are big, and she was as tiny as our thumb. She wrapped herself in a withered leaf, but it didn't keep her warm. The poor little girl was freezing, and her teeth chattered from the cold. Right in front of the very forest where she lived, a large wheat field stretched out. The wheat had long since been harvested, and only dry stubble protruded from the frozen ground. For Thumbelina, this was an entire forest. Oh, how she was trembling from the cold. At last, the little girl reached the field mouse's door. The door was a small hole covered with dry stalks and grasses. The field mouse lived in warmth and plenty. Her little house was crammed with grains of wheat, and her kitchen and pantry were wonderful. Thumbelina stood on the doorstep like a beggar and asked them to give her a piece of barley grain. She hadn't eaten anything for 2 days. "Oh, my poor little girl," said the field mouse, who actually had a very good heart. "Come inside to warm up and have something to eat with me." The mouse liked Thumbelina very much, and so the mouse said to her, "You can stay the whole winter with me, but you will have to clean my room and tell me stories. I love stories very much." And Thumbelina began to do everything that the good old mouse wished and lived magnificently. "We'll have guests soon," said the field mouse once. "My neighbour makes it a habit to visit me once a week. He is much better off than me. He has a big house and wears a beautiful black velvet fur coat. If you could marry him, you would be well off. However, he is blind and won't see you, so you will tell him the most beautiful stories you know." But Thumbelina paid no attention to the words of the mouse. She did not want to marry the neighbour because he was a mole. Soon the neighbour came to visit the field mouse. He was indeed dressed in a black velvet coat, and, as the field mouse said, he was very rich and learned. His house was 20 times bigger than hers, but he didn't like the sun or the flowers at all, and spoke very ill of them, because he'd never seen them. They invited Thumbelina to sing something, and she sang 2 lovely songs so sweetly that the mole immediately fell in love with her. But he didn't say a word because he was too prudent. Not long ago, the mole had dug a long passage underground from his house to his neighbour's house. Now he invited her and Thumbelina to walk freely through it. The mole only asked them not to be afraid of the dead bird that lay there. It was a real bird with feathers and a beak. It had probably died recently and had been buried right there where the mole had dug his passage. The mole took a piece of rotten wood in his mouth, which glowed in the darkness, and went ahead to light up the long, dark passage. When they reached the spot where the dead bird lay, he broke through the ceiling with his broad nose and pushed up the earth so that a large hole was formed, through which daylight penetrated. In the middle of the passage lay a dead swallow. Its beautiful wings were tightly pressed against its body, its little head and feet hidden beneath its feathers. The poor bird had probably died of cold. Thumbelina felt sorry for it. She loved all the little birds very much, the ones that sang and chirped such wonderful songs for her all summer long. But the mole nudged the swallow with his crooked feet and said, "Yes, she won't peep any more. That's what it means to be born a little bird. Thank goodness my children won't have such a fate. These birds can only chirp and die of cold in winter." "Yes, you are right," said the field mouse. "What good is that chirping of a bird? It freezes and starves in winter. And they also say that it's noble." Thumbelina said nothing, but when the mole and the mouse turned their backs to the bird, she bent over it, spread its little feathers, and kissed it on the eyes. "Perhaps this very bird sang so beautifully for me in the summer," thought the little girl. "How much joy you brought me, dear, lovely bird." Then the mole closed up the hole through which the light entered again, and saw the lady's home. But Thumbelina couldn't sleep that night. She got out of bed, wove a large rug from hay, took it to the passage, and wrapped the dead bird in it. After that, she piled downy flower parts around the bird, which she found in the mouse's pantry and which were soft as down, to keep it warm. "Farewell, dear bird," said Thumbelina. "Farewell, thank you for the wonderful songs in the summer when all the trees were green and the sun shone so warmly upon us." And she pressed her little head against the bird's chest, but suddenly she was startled. The swallow was not dead at all. Its heart was beating. It had only been numbed by the cold, and now it warmed up and came back to life. In autumn, swallows fly to warm countries, but if one of them lags behind, then it freezes, falls to the ground as if dead, and the cold snow covers it. Thumbelina trembled with fear, because compared to her, the bird looked like a giant. Yet she regained her courage, wrapped the swallow even better, then ran and brought the hemp leaf that served as her blanket and covered the bird's head with it. The following night, Thumbelina crept back to the swallow. Now it was completely revived, only it was still very weak. It could only open its eyes for a moment and look at Thumbelina, who stood before it with a piece of rotten wood in her hand, because there was no other lamp. "Thank you, little girl," said the sick swallow. "I've warmed up very well. Soon I'll be completely healthy and will be able to fly again under the sun's rays." "Oh," said the little girl, "it's so cold outside now. Everything is covered with snow. You'd better stay in your warm bed. I will take care of you." And Thumbelina brought the bird water in a flower petal. The swallow drank and told the little girl how it had hurt its little wing on a rosehip bush, and therefore couldn't fly as fast as the other swallows, who had gone far, far away to warm countries. Finally, it had fallen to the ground, and what happened after that, it couldn't remember. It didn't even know how it ended up here. Thus the swallow spent the entire winter underground, and Thumbelina took care of it with all her heart. Neither the mole nor the field mouse knew anything about this. They didn't like birds at all. When spring arrived and the sun warmed the earth, the swallow bid farewell to Thumbelina, who opened the hole dug by the mole. The sun shone wonderfully beautifully, and the swallow asked Thumbelina if she wanted to come with it. She could sit on its back and they would fly to the green forest. But Thumbelina didn't want to leave the old field mouse that way because she knew it would grieve her. "No, I cannot," she told the swallow. "Farewell, farewell, dear little girl," said the swallow, and flew off into the sun's rays. Thumbelina looked after it, and tears shone in her eyes. She had grown to love the poor bird so much. "Chirp, chirp, chirp, chirp," chirped the bird, and disappeared into the green forest. The little girl was very sad. She was not allowed to go out into the sun at all. The wheat that had been sown in the field above the field mouse's house grew tall. For poor Thumbelina it was a veritable thick forest. "During the summer you'll have to prepare your dowry," the field mouse told her. The annoying neighbour in the velvet coat had asked for Thumbelina's hand. "You must have everything since you'll be the mole's wife," the mouse was saying. And Thumbelina took up the spindle while the old mouse hired 4 spiders to spin day and night. Every evening the mole came to visit the field mouse and only spoke of how, when summer's end approached, the sun would no longer warm the earth so strongly as it had now hardened like stone. Then they would celebrate the wedding. But this did not please Thumbelina at all. She couldn't stand the annoying mole. Every morning at sunrise and every evening at sunset, Thumbelina went to the entrance of the mouse hole. Sometimes the wind swayed the wheat stalks, and she managed to glimpse a piece of blue sky. "How bright and beautiful it is here in freedom," thought the little girl, and remembered the swallow. She longed very much to see it, but the bird did not appear. Perhaps it was flying far away in the distant green forest. By autumn, Thumbelina's entire dowry was ready. "Your wedding will be in 4 weeks," said the field mouse. But Thumbelina cried and replied that she did not want to marry the annoying mole. "Nonsense," said the old mouse. "Don't be so stubborn or I might just crunch you up. You will have a splendid husband. The queen herself doesn't have such a black velvet coat as his, and his kitchen and cellar are packed with food. Thank God you'll have such a husband." And so the wedding day arrived. The mole came for the bride. Now she had to follow him into his hole to live there, deep, deep underground, and never to come out into the sun, because the mole couldn't stand the sun. and it was so hard for the poor little girl to part forever with the beautiful sunshine. At the field mouse's house, she could at least sometimes admire it from the doorway, and Thumbelina went out to look at the sun for the last time. The wheat had already been harvested from the field, and only dry stubble again protruded from the earth. The little girl stepped forward and stretched out her little hands towards the sun. "Farewell, bright sunshine, farewell." Then she embraced a small red flower that grew nearby and said to it, "Give my regards to the dear swallow if you see it." Chirp, 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 suddenly rang out above the little girl's head. Thumbelina looked up and saw the swallow flying above her. The swallow also saw her and was very happy, and the little girl cried and told it that she didn't want to marry the horrid mole and live with him deep underground, where the sun never peeked through. "Soon a cold winter will come," said the swallow. "I will fly far, far away to warm countries. Do you want to come with me? You will sit on my back, only you must tie yourself firmly with your belt, and we will escape from the ugly mole far beyond the blue seas, to warm lands where the sun shines even more brightly than here, where it is always summer and wonderful flowers bloom. Fly with me, dear little girl. You saved my life when I lay frozen in the dark hole." "Yes, yes, I will fly with you," said Thumbelina, sat on the bird's back, stretched her little feet over its outstretched wings, and tied herself firmly with her belt to the largest feather. The swallow soared like an arrow and flew over dark forests, over blue seas, and high mountains covered with snow. It was very cold in the air. Thumbelina hid in the swallow's warm feathers and only poked out her little head to admire the beauties that appeared on their way. At last they arrived in the warm lands. There the sun shone much more brightly. The sky was twice as high, and wonderfully beautiful vines wound around the ditches and fences. In the forests grew lemons and oranges. The air was fragrant with myrtles and balsam, and along the roads ran wonderfully beautiful children, catching large, colourful butterflies. But the swallow flew ever onwards, and the further it flew, the more beautiful everything around became. Among green, luxuriant trees on the shore of a beautiful blue lake stood an ancient white marble palace. Along its tall pillars climbed vines, and high up under the roof were many swallows' nests. In one of these nests lived the swallow that had carried Thumbelina on its back. "Here is my home," said the swallow, "and you choose one of these beautiful flowers down there. I will leave you there, and you will live wonderfully." "Oh, how wonderful that will be," cried Thumbelina, and clapped her tiny hands. Down on the ground lay a white marble pillar. It had fallen and broken into 3 pieces, but between these pieces grew wonderfully beautiful white flowers. The swallow descended and placed the little girl on the widest leaf of one of the flowers. But how surprised Thumbelina was! In the middle of the flower sat a tiny man, white and transparent as glass. On his head shone a marvellous golden cap, and behind his shoulders fluttered glistening wings. The little man himself was no bigger than Thumbelina. He was an elf. In every little flower lived an elf or an elf maiden, but the little man who sat next to Thumbelina was the chief of the elves himself. "Oh, how handsome he is," whispered Thumbelina to the swallow. But the little chief was quite frightened when he saw the bird. He was so tiny, so delicate, that in comparison to him, she seemed a veritable giant. On the other hand, the elf was very pleased when he saw Thumbelina, because he had never seen such a beautiful little girl. The chief of the elves immediately took off his golden cap from his head, placed it on Thumbelina's little head, and asked her what her name was and if she would like to become his wife. Now, that was a man. He resembled neither the disgusting son of the toad nor the mole in the velvet coat. And so Thumbelina said, "Yes." Then from every flower flew out an elf or an elf maiden, and they were so beautiful that one could not help but delight in them. They all brought Thumbelina a gift, but the most beautiful gift was two delicate wings from a large butterfly. These wings were fastened to the little girl's back, and then she began to flit from flower to flower. Oh, what joy that was! The little swallow sat up in her nest and sang a wedding song, although she was very sad. She had grown fond of Thumbelina and did not want to part with her. "You shall no longer be called Thumbelina," said the elf. "That name is ugly, and you are so beautiful. From now on, we shall call you Maya." "Farewell, farewell," chirped the swallow, and flew away from the warm lands back to Denmark. There she had a little nest above the window of the man who knows how to tell fairy tales. To him she sang, "Chirp, chirp," and that is how we came to know this entire tale.
Thank you for joining me on Fairy Tale Dreams. May your night be filled with the most magical dreams. Good night.